Hi everybody, today I want to do a tutorial on the board game Supremacy. Supremacy is a board game, a strategic board game that was released in 1985 and was designed by Robert J. Simpson. It's a strategic game for 2 to 6 players, and the theme of the game is you're a superpower trying to vie for control of the world around the end of the Cold War period. The game is played with conventional forces such as armies and navies, and also through strategic forces such as nuclear missiles or nuclear bombs or nukes, and laser satellites or L-stars. To win the game is obviously, as the name suggests, supremacy. You want to be the person who wipes the floor with your opponents and has control of all the opponent's territories to be claimed victor. Now there is a second rule set, so if you don't have time to play a full game, you have another set of rules called détente. So where you have at the start of the game, you have a pre-arranged number of turns for the game, say 40 or 50 turns, or you may say the game to end at a certain time frame. When the time hits, you play the final round, and then the winner is determined through a points-based system. So each of the players would add up their armies, navies, strategic weapons such as nukes, L-stars, resources on hand and cash in hand, and that's converted to a points system, and then the person with the highest amount of points wins the game. Now, there is a third option, which basically is a loss option for everybody, and that's nuclear winter. Throughout the game, obviously nukes are used, and when a nuke is used on a landmass, that area is destroyed and is out of play for the remainder of the game. When a total of 12 areas has been destroyed by nuclear weapons, then you run the risk of going into nuclear winter. And so there's a dice roll system in place for each nuke for 12 and after. Increasing, the more nukes fired after 12, the increasing risk of nuclear winter occurs. Once the 18th nuke hits the board, and then it is game over. And then basically the world goes into nuclear winter and nobody wins. So we'll start to look at the components of the game. We can see here we've got the world map. This is the basic board. And we can see here the colour chips for each of the different countries: South America, USA, Europe, Africa, China and Russia. We also have the neutral countries, which are in grey, and we have then also, we see here the light blue areas are light blue sea areas, ocean areas dark blue, and then we have our neutral territories in the grey. Down the side of the board we have a ready reckoner here for our order of play, which lists the turn cycle. It also lists the battle drill for both conventional and strategic forces. At the top of the map we can see our market, and this shows how much the market is buying and selling for each of the minerals. We can see in green, the green dots at the top are grain, pink are oil, and the yellow are minerals. And we'll go through the market process later, but it's there for keeping track of the current market. Looking at other resources that come with the game. Today we're using version 3 of the Supremacy rules, and we're just talking about the base game today. The Supremacy game itself has released quite a number of expansions over the years. I think between period 85 to about 92. Robert Simpson released a number of expansions, making the game incredibly complex and adding a lot of depth to the game, all the way up to the Mega Supremacy rules and map. I'm just talking about the basic rules today. If time allows, I'll post some videos looking at the expansion packs and increasing the rules. So this tutorial today is aimed at new players to the game and helping them through understanding the flow of the game. At the start of the game, you'll appoint a marshal. So the marshal is the person who will have the greatest understanding of the rules, and his or her job is to ensure the smooth play of the game and to interpret the rules for each of the players to help them through that. You also have a person allotted as banker. The banker will be in charge of the funds. Also, as another caveat, if you notice on my set, you'll see some of the figures look a bit odd, the wrong colours, the money is all different in colour. I've had to reprint a lot of the pieces that were lost throughout the years, and so if my set's a little bit different to yours, don't worry about it. The components are the same. So what we have here is the Supremacy rules, version 3. The resource deck, which is the resource cards, money in different dominations, your supply centre, your resource cards and your army units. For each army you'll get a different colour piece. So this is South American pieces. And we see here the oblong pieces are your navies and the square pieces are your armies. We also see the nuke markers. In the base game these will be black. And we'll also need a quantity of dice for the gameplay. So with the starting components of the game, we see here this is your supply center. Each player will have one of these supply centers for their use for their superpower. Basically, it has some basic information about movement costs for your armies and navies, building costs where you're building your armies and navies, nukes and L-stars, so give you an idea how much you need to spend each turn when you're producing those units. Here we have our strategic force markers, our natural resource markers for minerals, oil and grain, and the final column is for bank loans. So as you start the game, you'll have units or resources. So in this instance, your starting resources for the game will be 3 of each. So you start with 3 minerals, 3 oil and 3 grain. And you would start with no L-stars and no nukes, and you won't have any bank loans in operation. As you build strategic weapons, you would then place the marker on along the how many basically units you produced in a build phase. So if I bought, in this case, it would show I have 2 L-stars and 4 nukes in my possession, and again 3 of each mineral resource. And as the game flows, if I need to borrow money from the bank, I can say, so take out a $2 billion loan from the bank. It then shows me how much interest I have to pay back each turn until the principal is paid off. So with that, at the start of each round in the payment phase, I have to pay 100 million on each of the bank each round for a $2 billion loan. Once it's paid off, or pay off then the interest payments become then decreased. As you sell minerals, you would obviously delete those supplies, moving it down, and as you buy new minerals through the buy phase, you're going to add that up. So you've got a maximum of 12 on your range. Once you've filled up your 12th, any additional resources you produce or purchase are lost. So that's just the supply center. So now talking about the other starting resources for each player, you will start with $7 billion in cash, and you'll start with the resource cards for your territories. For the grain, oils and minerals, you'll get 2 cards for each, and for the superpowers, they'll have about the same starting production value. So we can see here in Argentina, that territory, that production company gives me 3 units of grain per round or per turn, and Venezuela produces me 2 grain per turn. Peru, for example, will produce 2 minerals per turn, and Venezuela produce 3 units of oil per turn. So essentially, for the base starting game, with the resource you have on hand, you'll produce 5 of each mineral type or resource type. If you lose the territory, so for example, I lost Argentina, I would lose. The person who captures that then gains control of the company and the resources from that. And as you capture other territories with active resource companies in there, you then gain the resources for those. So that's your starting group, and so obviously you need to make sure you retain the territories where you have a resource company. Right, now we've discussed the board game components and the objectives of the game. We'll talk about how the game is played. The game is broken up into rounds, and in each of those rounds there are 7 stages. So you look at the ready record on the left or right of your board, you can see the stages listed down there. Of these stages, stage 1 and 2 are mandatory for all players. Then remaining stages 3 through to 7, players are able to play 3 of those 5 remaining stages. So essentially you can't play all the stages, but you can choose which ones you play. And we'll show you how to do the system, how you actually mark your participation in each of those rounds. So the very first one we'll do is start with stage 1. Pay salaries and loans to the bank. This is quite straightforward. You basically pay, for every army or navy in the board, you pay $10 million, and you pay $50 million for each active resource company you have on the board. So we can sort with South America, we start with 4 armies, and we have 6 resource companies. So we're paying $340 million for the initial salaries for that. In this stage, if you don't pay the upkeep of your armies or navies, then they're removed from the game. So if you can't afford to pay them, you will then basically remove them for every army or navy you don't pay their upkeep on. With resource companies, if you don't pay the upkeep cost, then you're able to draw the resources for them for the turn you haven't paid. So the following stage, you pay the upkeep cost, you can then continue to draw resources from those companies. It's all quite straightforward. And then we move on to stage 2, transfer the production units to the supply centre. Now we saw on the initial setup, we have 6 companies, and with those initial starting companies, they generate 5 of each resource. So they'll give me 5 minerals, 5 oil, and 5 grain. So on your supply centre, as we showed you, we then move it up. So with your you'd start with the 3 of each resource, and then in stage 2, you then add your resources. So it'll give me 8 resources at the end of stage 2: 8 oil, 8 mineral, and 8 grain. And that's how you get it. Well, there's some other rules around obtaining resources, which we'll go through a bit later on. And that moves us on to stage 3. Once we've done our resource collection, now stages 3 to 7, as I said, not everybody, you can only play 3 of those stages. So what occurs is a blind bait system. Basically, we get everyone to put their fist in the middle of the game, and at the same time, we turn over. If you have a piece in your hand, it means you're playing for that, you bid to play in that round. And you do this for all the raids. And this is to allow other players to be unsure as to what you're playing. Will you be participating in an attack phase, or will you be participating in a buy or sell phase? So it's a blind bid system. And so say if I've done a buy bid, I want to go into the sell phase, and then I will then place one of my coloured tokens there, and you have all the different ones. So then it gives you a track of how many of those rounds I've played through there. So if I played stage 3 and 5 and then 7, you can see where I've spent my turn points in there. All right, so we're going to sell phase now. So now we're into stage 3, the sell phase. What we can see here, we'll look at the setup. First of all, we'll talk about the market. So you can see up here, this is the stock market, how it sits at the moment. Each of these indicates for different resources, minerals, oils, and grain, how much the market is buying your commodities for. So this is the sell phase is a way of converting your resources into cash. So how it works in order of turn. So we've had, say for example, 3 of the players in the game want to participate in the sell phase. We've all done a blind bid, we've all put our tokens in to say we're participating in this stage. With that done, we determine in order who goes first in the round. So for example, we do a dice roll, and so if South America gets the roll, and it gets the highest roll and can go first in the round. The second player can have a go at the selling, the third player, and then once that cycle's gone complete, the players can start again. If you haven't participated in the blind bid for this stage, you cannot sell. You miss out on the round. So, for example, South America has the first go, and we saw here we had our starting resources of 3 on the board, and then in the resource phase in stage 2, we've paid for our production companies. We now have a total of 5 of each of those resources in our supply centre. Because I'm the first person to sell, I can choose to sell 1 of my resources. I can choose to sell how many I'd like to do. So for example, in this case, I'm going to sell some minerals. So I might sell 5 of my minerals. So I'll delete those minerals off my supply centre, and I'll move the equivalent amount there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I will get $500 million for each of those. So I'll get 2.5 billion for my sale there. The bank will then transfer it to me as cash. And then the next person, so for example, Russia was the second player they could do the same. They might sell 2 units of oil, and maybe the third player, Africa, might sell again another 5 units of grain. You can see how this has the effect of driving the market prices down. And so in the buy phase, the buy stage later on, you can see that the price will become cheaper when you're buying commodities or buying resources. So the other 2 players who had their sell, goes back to me. I go, well, oil is still worth a bit of money at this point in time. I will sell maybe another 5 units, for example. and it would take me down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that would net me 400 million per unit, so it would net me $2 billion there, and goes through, and that has the effect of driving the market right down. You've got to be careful in this phase, so you don't want to sell leave yourself too short of resources, because you'll require them for the build stage later on. And if you are doing moves or attacks, you also need to delete supplies. So, and both for attack and defense. So you never want to leave your strategic reserve down too low, otherwise you can find yourself at a disadvantage. So that's the sell stage. Remember, you have to participate in this round by doing a blind bid. Now we move on to stage 4. Now stage 4 is the guts of the game. This is what the game is all about. Military conquest. In this phase, players can either attack with nuclear or rather strategic weapons, or they can use conventional forces. Now, the basic rules show that you cannot attack in round 1, nor can you develop strategic weapons. So you can't research L-stars or nukes in the first round. So round 2 and beyond, you can start attacking to your heart's content and start developing L-star and nuke technology. In this phase, again, it's a blind bid system. If you choose to participate in this round, you participate in a blind bid. You put one of your tiles to indicate you're participating in this round. We determine play sequence by dice to work out who goes first. So say, for example, we have 3 players in this round. We determine that we play A, B and C. Player A will go first. Now, it's broken into 2 parts. Player A will do an attack, and then the person who player A attacked can do a counter attack. So you can either do conventional or strategic attacks in this phase. So in the first example, we might say South America is going to attack the US, doing a conventional attack. Once that is resolved, the US then has their counter attack. They can choose to attack either back to the attacker in either conventional or strategic, or counter attack a third party. So in this instance, the US may attack Russia with nukes, do a nuke attack on Russia. So that attack is then resolved as part of their counterattack. Then Russia then has an option to do a counterattack. They could go back to the USA, or they could attack another party, and then that other party will get a counterattack. So it can be quite a long counterattack chain, and each of them will result in turn. So in this instance, we might say player A attacks the US conventionally, the US will attack Russia strategically, Russia attacks back to America or US strategically, and that would end that attack chain. So that would be player A's turn complete. It would then move on to player B. Player B would then have their attack phase. They'll do a conventional strategic attack, and then their target could then do a counter attack, and so on and so forth. And so you would resolve the counter attack chain, it resolve player B's attack and the counter attack chain, and it will move on to player C and so on. Once that cycle is complete, it goes back to player A. If player A so desires, they can go another attack, and same for player B and C, and it will keep rotating until any of the players in that attack phase have exhausted their attacks. Right, so we'll talk about conventional attacks. So we'll look at the how conventional army navies attack. So we can see here, for example, armies can do a adjacent attack, so they can go from territory to territory. So armies can attack other armies, so from Central America to Midwest USA, basically being adjacent, and they can attack into that area there. Armies can also attack adjacent navies adjacent in light blue seas. So, for example, Eastern USA could project an attack into the Caribbean Sea. Naval units here can also attack. Naval units can attack adjacent land territories from the light blue sea to the landmass, and they can also attack into adjacent light blue territories. Now, dark blue seas have their own special rule. The oceans have their own rules. Normally, through movement phase, opposing superpowers can actually occupy the same dark blue area without causing conflict. However, in attack phase, a vessel in a dark blue area can attack a opposing navy in the same dark blue area, and Navies in a dark blue area can also attack into a light blue area, adjacent light blue area. However, navies in a light blue area can't attack back into a dark blue area. So that's how the conventional forces attack. Now we go into the conventional warfare stages. There are 6 stages in this area. So I'm putting them up on screen here now. So first of all, we've got step A, identify the theatre of war. So in this instance, I'm going to do an attack from Central America to Midwest USA. So when I've declared that, we all know, so it's going to be conventional warfare. I will then remove supplies. To do an attack costs me 1 of each supply, 1 oil, 1 mineral, 1 grain. Once I delete that, I am then able to conduct that attack. The defender then has the option of also deleting 1 set of supplies in the attack phase to increase their defence dice. Once we've determined, once the supplies are expended, we then go and calculate dice. Now the attacker gets 1 dice, when they're being attacked. If they delete 1 set of supplies, which is optional for them, they will get a 2nd dice. As the attacker, I'll pay my supplies to get 1 dice. Then we go through the next stage, calculating the force numbers. So we can see here in Central America, and attacking the Midwest USA, I have a force ratio of 4 to 1. So I have the larger force, so I will get a 2nd die. Then finally we'll calculate L stars. So the player with the most number of L stars gets an additional dice. So if we have parity, US and South America have parity with L stars, no one gets a dice. But if say for example South America has even one more L star than the US, then they will get a 3rd die. Once we've done that, we go into step D rather, roll the dice and count the losses. In this phase, I will tuck the roll here. So as a US, I'll roll my dice. And now for every 3 pips on the dice, I will destroy 1 unit. So here I've got a 11, so I would destroy 3 units. So if I only destroy 1, and so I've done overkill there essentially. Now, even though the US has no forces there, they still get to get their counterattack, their defensive dice. So they'll roll and they'll take off 1 for each pip. So again, we've got 6, we'd lose 2 defenders there. Now, there's a couple of different scenarios how this attack would play out. There might be a standoff where both forces still have troops on the ground, and basically nothing occurs then, and that's in the attack that stage D. Now, if only the defender is destroyed, then in stage D, the attacker has the right to move forces into the vacated territory, and they would use they would spend the standard move costs to get forces into that area. Now we'll talk about move costs in stage 5 a bit more in detail. But essentially, if the area is vacant and the defender is lost, then I can move forces in there. However, if the reverse was true, for example, if the defender somehow managed to stay alive and only the attacker is destroyed, then the defender has the right in this stage to move forces into and occupy the attacker's area. Once these areas are captured, any resource cards that are in play go to the occupier of those territories. And finally, if there was, say, a different outcome, so mutual destruction, so both the attacker and defender are destroyed in this one. The attacker has the advantage in this one. The attacker has the option of moving forces both into the occupied, where they've attacked from and where they've attacked to. They have to spend, obviously, the movement costs to get those troops here, but they have the option of doing that. If in this stage the attacker fails to occupy that area, then in step E, move reinforcement stage, the defender gets to reoccupy that area. So once we've roll the dice, count the losses in step D, we then move to step E and move reinforcements. Now the defender has the first option of moving reinforcements. So the defender might move in a couple of forces in here and expend the movement costs, and then goes back to the attacker, and I get to move reinforcements as well. So I may move some reinforcements up to fill the void here. Once that's complete, then the attacker goes into the counter-attack phase, where they do a conventional attack again, or they go to a strategic attack. All right, now we'll talk about some other tactics as well. There's a couple of tactics I'll touch upon, but won't go into detail about them. One is the amphibious assault, where you can do a convoy to do an attack. We'll discuss this further in convoys further in the move phase. But essentially what you would do is you could load up your armies onto your navy at a remote location, spend your movement costs to get them there, and then conduct a amphibious assault into and this is basically a surprise attack where you load and go and move your forces a great deal. But again, I won't touch upon the rules. See a marshal or look through the rules on that one. The other option is you've got the capacity to what they call a airborne assault, where you airlift troops to a remote location. For example, I could remote airlift troops into eastern Canada and could do an airborne assault that way. Again, slightly different, slight additional rules for that attack. But essentially the convention using the dice and rolling dice and removing losses is the same. And then finally we move on to the defensive tactics. During step A, the defender has a few options. Now, as we said, the defender gets one die when they're being attacked in a conventional manner, and they can choose not to expend resources. They may not have resources to expend, and so they would just resist. If they did spend their resources, they get 2 defensive die. Another option for the defenders is withdrawal. So, for example, I'm attacking into Central America into Midwest USA. The US player may choose withdrawal, and they can withdraw their troops into friendly adjacent territories and sacrifice the territory. And basically, the attack doesn't occur, and then the attacker can move into that uncontested into the Midwest USA. And they would also get any of the resources that are in that area at the time. They can also choose to surrender their force as one option. So if a player at any stage has to surrender a force, any forces in that area are converted to the colour of the attacker, and any resource cards are given over to the person who occupies that territory. And then finally, the last part of this round is the first strike capacity. So we see here, if any of the players have also participating in this round, they also have the capacity to do a first strike. So, for example, South America and America in this stage, if I attack America as a conventional force, conventional attack into America at this stage, the US has the capacity to do a first strike. So they could actually do a strategic using nukes upon me to attack anywhere in my territory, because it basically shows that the US is ready for an attack. They're in this attack stage, and they basically have their nuclear weapons on standby. So once that first strike has been complete, then I could go back and do my conventional attack. So the US may put a nuke into Central America, or they could do a large attack on the rest of my territories. So be aware, if you're attacking any other player in this stage and they have actually participated in this stage, then their first strike rule is then active. One final rule for the conventional attack stage is the militia rule. You can, on your turn, attack into an unoccupied territory, be that an unoccupied territory of a neutral country or an unoccupied territory of a superpower. You can only occupy unoccupied territories during an attack, during the attack phase. You can't move into an unoccupied superpower territory. So in this instance, I could do a conventional attack into a territory. So I'd identify my theatre of war. In this case, I'm going to go from Venezuela into Central America. I would pay my resources, one of each, oil, mineral and grain, and move in there. The only difference is there's considered to be militia in the territory. They get a single defence die. The attacker doesn't have to roll attack dice, but the attacker will do a single defence die. And again, remove 2 units for every 3 pips on the die. So in this case, we're attacking into that's where the defender would lose 2. The territory is mine, and now I could pay the movement costs as per to move forces in there. Same for light blue areas. If I want to capture an unoccupied light blue area, I could do an attack move into that, spend my resources, and the defender will get a single militia die to defend. Now we move forward to the strategic component of the attack phase. Now, the strategic component, you can either attack as an attacker with either nukes or with L stars, which is an L star clash. So in this instance, we'll say that the attacker is South America attacking the USA and going to use nukes. The attacker does the following steps. First off, they'll target the area of the nuclear attack. So I'm going to do several territories within the US. And I'll declare my tactics. Now, tactics are I can either fire a single nuke as a solo shot, or I can fire a cluster of my nukes. So where I can fire 1, 2 or more nukes at the same time at 1 or more targets. So here in my silo I have 5 nukes. I'm going to use all 5, and the US has 4 L stars in their arsenal. So they can stop, pretty much, they have a good chance of stopping at least 4 of the nukes. At this stage, the other players in stage C can actually offer to become L star champions. That is where they'll use their L stars to also defend the US against the incoming nuclear threat. L stars destroy a nuke on a roll of 1 to 5 and miss the nuke on a roll of 6. L star champions, other players, will stop a nuke their L star will stop a nuke on a 1, 2 or 3, and 4, 5 or 6 will miss the nuke. So in this instance, we'll keep it simple. We'll say that the US hasn't got any other L star champions. So I am now going to identify how I'm doing it. So I'm going to basically put my 5 nukes down, and you can see I'll turn them upside down, just basically showing that I'm targeting these areas. I can also target light blue C areas with nukes. And I'll put my 5th, and I might put another one here in Eastern USA, because it's a high strategic target. I want to make sure that one goes down. From there, there's no L-star champions, so then we'll talk about the defender choosing defense roles. So in this instance, the defender has 4 L-stars, so he'll choose which 4 he'll go through. So he's going to leave the C territory go through, and he'll target these 4 nukes with his 4 L-stars. So I'll go through and roll 6. So that one actually gets through. 6 gets through as well. So US is having a bit of a bad day. So 3 of the 5 nukes get through. So then what happens then is those nukes then are not stopped. They'll go on to detonate. So then they'll get flipped, indicating a successful nuclear launch onto the area. From here, what will happen is that area where the nuke detonates is destroyed. Any resource companies that you own for that territory, and they're active at this point in time, are returned to the deck, and all forces are destroyed, and you can no longer enter or pass through those territories on the landmass. C territories, so light blue areas, when a nuke detonates, the forces in that area are destroyed, but then in turn the nuke disappears, and the nukes don't count towards the global tally for nuclear winter. So basically you can still go back through that territory at the end of the round. So it's nuclear weapons. As I said, L-stars have a very good chance of defeating nukes. And as I said, other players can also jump in and participate in an L-star screen. Once champions commit to that phase, they can't renege. So once you've committed to an L-star screen, you have to then commit your L-stars to the defense of that player. The other type of strategic attack, well, there's another one. You can use your nukes to do a strategic, or you can do a space attack blast. This is a tactic where you fire your nukes into orbit and detonate them. So if a single nuke gets through and detonates in space, all L-stars for all players are destroyed. So for example, if I had my 5 nukes and there's 4 people with L-stars on the table, I can fire all my nukes into the orbit and hope that I can get a detonation. And one or all other players can then champion that as L-star champions. And so if one nuke gets through and detonates, then all L-stars are destroyed for all players. And then this initiates a counterattack for all players that had an L-star that was destroyed. So this can get quite messy with a space blast. But it also has the tactical advantage of removing L-stars. If you are trying to use conventional forces and someone has superiority with L-stars, you might try and just launch a heap of nukes to get through and destroy that advantage for them. Now, the last type of attack, strategic attack, is an L-star clash. So, for example, I have a large number of, I have 8 L-stars. My opponent has 4 L-stars. I want to remove all their L-stars, so I have basically free reign of putting nukes into their territory. An L-star clash is basically declare how many, I'm going to use all my 8 L-stars, and I'll roll against each of his L-stars. So basically it's just a simple dice roll. Each player would roll for the L-star, and the highest die would there'll be destruction of the other L-star. Once you commit, you're committed for the entire. So if you're doing badly in dice rolls and you're losing all L-stars in your opponent, you can't stop until all L-stars have been rolled off and totaled. So a risky tactic, but can pay off when you're trying to get advantage with L-stars over your opponent. In this phase, stage 4, there's a couple of other tactics we need to discuss, and it's called blockade. So for example, we want, so the US has the Sahara here, and they've got a resource company in Sahara, and I have a naval unit in the Mediterranean Sea. During this phase, I can say I'm going to blockade that port. And basically that means the opposing player can't reinforce that territory. So all production units from that territory is ceased until the port is freed. So if the resource company is here, the US can't then gain any oil or grain from any resource companies here. The other type of tactic is siege. Say, for example, you've managed to surround your opponent's home territories with your naval vessels of either yours or an opposing country. So, say Europe and Russia also aid in blocking all the ports for the US's territory, home territories. Then they can put that under siege. And that will stop him from getting any resources from anywhere else on the map, and will stop the US from supplying forces or deploying forces anywhere else on the map until that siege has been destroyed. Once he releases a port, and then he can then access it again. And the final part is the spoils of war. Say, for example, you take out your opponent's last territory. So here in the US, we've only got the eastern USA where he's got forces. Alaska's been taken on, and so we're taking on the US's last area. Now, if we capture that last area, then the US has no means of counterattack to get forces back into the eastern US, then all these territories then have been captured, and then the spoils of war rule is enacted. What happens then is all the nukes, L-stars, and money, and Army-Navy pieces in other territories basically go to the victor of this particular battle. So in this case, all the resource cards, money, resources, and forces go to South America. Also note that when you capture another player and you've got the spoils of war, you'll also get their supply centre, effectively doubling your capacity to hold grain and resource minerals, oils, and grains. Plus your L-star capacity is also doubled. So this is quite a big advantage once you've managed to do if you capture another opponent's territory. But if, for example, the last territory is in the US, is then nuked, then the spoils of war roll is not enacted, and basically all the player is out of the game, but all their supply centre, all their forces are removed from the game. Okay, that now brings us to stage 5, movement, move armies or navies. Again, this is participate if the players have engaged in a blind bid and actually use one of their 3 tokens, they can participate in this stage. Those who are playing this stage get to roll off, and the highest roll will go first, and so on in order. And they will complete all their moves before passing to the next player. Armies can move in 3 different ways. Armies can do a march. They can go via airlift, or they can go via convoy. So in this case, say example, we want to move an army unit into Central America from Venezuela. This will cost me 1 grain to move 1 unit, 1 territory. So if I move, so it costs 1, so I want to move 2 units from Venezuela to Central America. That would cost me a total of 2 grains to march those in. I would delete those from my supply center as I've done that movement. If you don't have the supplies, then obviously you can't make the move. That's a march move. The second type of movement is an airlift move. So to airlift, I can move an airlift unit to any unoccupied territory for a cost of anywhere on the world map for a cost of 2 oil per unit. So for example, here I want to take 2 units from Argentina and move them up into Western Canada. It costs me 2 oil units per unit transferred. So I'll move 2 units, so for a total cost of 4 oil. So I delete that from my supply center. Now the third way I can move units is via convoy. That is putting army units onto a navy and moving them that way. So for loading, I can load from any number of armies up to a maximum of 4 from with adjacent territories. So you can see in Lima Bay here, I've got 3 different territories that are adjacent to the navy, and I can load from there. So for a cost of 1 oil, I can load up to 4 armies into that 1 naval unit. So for example, here I can load from Argentina, and I'll load from Peru, and I can put my 3 armies. So if I had a 4th army, saying I had another army in Venezuela, I could load up to the 4. So it costs 1 to load from 1 territory adjacent territories into the navy. So I've done my load move, and I can then convoy across. And this now costs 1 oil. This now costs me 1 oil for each territory, light blue area or dark blue area I transfer with. So in this case, I'm going to go from Lima Bay to Gulf of Panama and into all the way to Berkeley Sound. So it's cost me 1 to load the armies, 1 oil, 2, 3, 4. So for a total of 4 oil, I managed to convoy the armies up to near Western Canada or Western USA. Then to unload, it's then free to unload. Now I can unload into 1 territory because Berkeley Sound adjacent to Western USA, Western Canada, Alaska. I can unload those units into any of those territories if they are unoccupied. So it costs nothing to unload once they get there. So in this case, I could unload a couple of units here. I could unload Alaska as part of my move. Again, on the proviso that there's no enemy forces there. If there was enemy forces there, then I have to do an attack move, covering the attack phase. So that's movement. Make sure you have the resources, obviously, to move it. And that is stage 5. Now we're entering into stage 6, build and deploy of forces. Again, this is a blind bid phase, so once you've bid for your phase, you can then, the players who participate in this phase will determine player sequence, again by rolling the dice. Highest number will go first and the player with the least will go lowest. And you can see how we're tracking each player who's done what in their phases by placing their coloured tile next to their onto the phase. So we can see that China has done their 3 moves for the turn already, US is doing their 3rd move, and in this case South America is also doing their 3rd move, and Europe still has 1 more stage to go, so they'll go into stage 7. There's a way of tracking your opponents, seeing where they're going with their rounds. Now in this case, I want the player goes first. You have the specific sequence you want to engage in. So first off is building and deploying conventional forces. Second phase, part of this is building and deploying strategic weapons. After that then comes research and development, and then arms bazaar. The rules in this game, so in the first round you cannot build or research nuclear or strategic weapons. So we'll start off with building conventional forces. Now, building conventional forces is done in units of 3. To build units, you delete one of each resource, one oil, rain and mineral, and that will allow you to build up to 3 units, conventional units, be they army or navies or a combination thereof. And then you pay $100 million per unit you produce. So if I delete one of each resource from my supply centre, and then I can build, say, 3 armies here. So I can build my 3 armies at a cost of 100 million each. So it's cost me one of each resource and 100 million so far. Then, so I want to build another second unit. I'll delete building more conventional forces. I'll delete another set of oil, mineral and grain and pay another 300 million. And I can then build, say, another 2 navies and an army. So this is what my total build. So my build cost for these 6 here is 2 of each mineral, each resource, mineral, oil and grain, and then 100 million each, so 600 million. Once I've paid my costs for building them, I can then deploy them. In the deploy phase, I can place on my home territory at any stage if it's vacant and doesn't have an enemy force there, and even if there's no units there. I can play on a neutral territory or an opposing superpower territory if I have forces already there. So I can place a force into the area. I can stack as many forces as I want to notice. Obviously, be aware if you keep stacking the forces there, they become a very attractive target for a nuclear weapon. So when I place Navy units, different set of rules. I can place in any of my home territory ports, so long as there's no opposing vessel there, in this case. Now I want to play a vessel in a shared light blue area. So for example, the Mediterranean Sea or the Caribbean Sea shares ports in that sea, with that light blue area, with an opposing force. So for example, I can't place in the Caribbean Sea or the Mediterranean Sea when there's an opposing force controlling a port in the same area, unless that other player gives me permission to build. In this case they don't, so I'll just go to place in one of my own. I can stack as many units as I want in any one territory, but as I said, it becomes a risk for strategic weapons and it becomes an attractive target. So that's deploying your conventional forces. Strategic forces. Now you can't research or build strategic forces in your first turn, and in the second and subsequent turns you can only build those devices once you have done the research. So when you've got the research, you can build nukes at 500 million per unit and 1 mineral, and L-stars cost you 1 billion and 2 minerals per unit. But if you haven't done the research, then you can't build them, and that comes to the next part of the phase, the research phase. So this is round 2, and I'm want to start building some nukes. So I'll start the research for my nukes. So what I'll do is get the resource card deck. In the resource card deck, obviously you've got all the unused resources, but importantly you also have 3 nuke cards in the deck and 2 L-star decks. L-star cards. Now to do the research, to conduct the research, I'm stating what I'm researching, so in this case I'm going to be researching nukes, and I'll flip a card I'll keep flipping until I get the desired card. So I'm looking for a nuke card, and I'll pay 200 million for each card that I flip. So the first one, no. Third card up, I've pulled out a nuke card. So that's cost me, in my research phase, 600 million for those cards. I've successfully completed the research for the nuke, and I'm allowed to build in my first nuke in this round. So I'll remove 1 mineral, and I'll pay my 500 million, I get my first nuke. You can only build 1 nuke in the turn that you actually research nuclear weapons. Now, so if I want to go researching L-stars, same deal again, you will flip cards. The odds are slightly lower because I've got 2 L-star cards in the deck. So you go through and do your research, flipping cards until you get your L-star. And this can get quite expensive. Okay, again, in the third card, we've pulled out an L-star card. So let's complete our research for the L-star. Now, unfortunately can't build an L star on a turn you do the research. So once you've got your research, then the next turn you're able to build your levels. You can build up your resources for those. Again, you pay your 500 million and 1 mineral for a nuke, or 2 minerals and $1 billion for each L star. And as you buy them, acquire them, you mark them on your supply. You move your supply center marker up for each of those. The final part of the stage is the arms bazaar, where you can negotiate with other people to sell your nukes or L stars to them, basically for whatever terms you can get for them. If you sell armies, you're then responsible for moving those armies to the player, so to get those armies. So that concludes stage 6. Now we move into the final stage of the game, stage 7. This allows you to do one of a couple of different options. You may buy or prospect for resources. If in the blind bid phase you still have 2 tokens left in your turns, and you can do what you call a double 7, where you can do 2 actions on stage 7. So if you value, say, participate in stage 4 was an attack phase, and you've got two other tokens you can use, you can both buy and sell on this stage if you use 2 of your turn tokens in there. So both are quite self-explanatory. Again, those players are participating in stage 7 if they're basically roll of dice as here goes first, regardless of whether they're buying or prospecting. The highest player goes first, and then they undertake their actions. So, for example, if I've done stage 7, I've put 2 tokens in there, I get 2 turns. I get 2 parts of the stage 7. I can both buy and prospect. So buying is, your intent is to buy cheap resources and to drive the market up. So bear in mind that at the end of this turn, you'll go back into stage 1 and 2 where you resource again. So you don't want to go crazy in buying up your resources unless you are trying to drive the market up as high as possible the next round. Now, give me an example of that. If I was a first player in the buy phase, you can see here now, minerals are now dirt cheap. They've been pushed all the way down to the bull market. They're selling for $1 million a resource. Now, remember, you were selling them earlier for 500 million. You can now purchase, if the market's been driven down so low, if you're that lucky, you can then push that market right up. And so, for example, in my turn, I may choose to buy minerals, right? So I've got 3 here. I can buy an additional 9. So for 9 million, total poultry 9 million, I can drive that all the way up. But if I want to be a bit cheeky, I can go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. If I buy 17 units for 17 million, I can drive the next price of minerals in the sell phase all up to $1 billion per. So this would benefit me because all of a sudden, if I get into the sell phase next round, I've got a full house for resources and I've driven the market price up to a significant level. But when you see that, you'll be competing with other players to try and get them. I've done my sell, so it goes into the next player. They will then go through the buy phase as well, and so they may buy as well. The next player may drive up minerals, and the third player, $10 million a grain, might push up a bit to and then you'll fill your resource marker up. But any unused, if you buy beyond your resource capacity, those resources are lost. As I said, you go to your maximum level of 12, you don't get any more. And in this case, if I bought up minerals to this level, when it starts next round, I'll get my 5 starting resources. They'll come in, no will be lost. There is some provision for that in the rules for doing what they call a drop ship, where you can sell surplus resources. Get to refer to the manual for that. It's quite straightforward. So once the market is closed, everyone's done their buying and selling. In your turn, you can also buy resources from other players and negotiate a price. And essentially, it's the opposite of the sell phase. You are driving the market up, you're driving up demand and then driving up the prices. And so this is the ebb and flow of the economy in this game. The final part of this phase is the prospecting. So this is the way you'll get access to, the other way of getting access to more resource companies is A, you attack another country and take on their territories, and as you capture their territories, you'll get their resource cards. But you can see also a number of unplayed superpowers or neutral territories. You'll find that you'll have resource companies in there which you can obtain. So for example, I think I need more grain. I can then start prospecting for new resources. So in this phase, I'm going to stack, I'm going to go looking for grain. I will, similar fashion to your researching your technology for L-stars and nukes, you specify which resource you're going for. In this case, I want to research for grain, or sort of prospect for grain. So I'll flip a card over, I'll be paying 200 million per card. And until I flip a grain over, I'll keep going. If I flip over an L-star or a nuke card, I still pay for that as well, even though it won't yield me any results. Another mineral. Okay, now I've got a grain card. So here I've prospected all the cards, and I have now found myself a grain card. So I'll pay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll pay $1 billion for the prospecting, and I'll get to keep the grain card. The other cards go back into the deck. So this is now my company. I'll basically conceal this until such time as I can. So it's Poland. So such time as I can occupy Poland, I can, once I've got forces there that I can actually defend it, I can then turn my company over and start production. I'll start paying in the in stage 1. I'll put that over in stage 1, and it will start producing in stage 2. But if I start the company up before I have forces there, yeah, I can do that, but it's quite vulnerable to having another player marching an army in there and squatting, and all of a sudden they'll get the resources from that particular one. So there's no point bringing up a resource company until you can actually defend it. So that's how you gain more resources, and each of the territories will have a resource company attached to that. So again, by capturing territory in your opponent's territories, you can capture their resources, or you can go prospecting and capture resources in those countries. If an opponent already has say a resource company in Turkey, and you can capture that territory, push them out, then you get squatters' rights and you get access to it. You would still need to pay the cost of that company, but you get the resources coming out of that company. And then ends stage 7, and we go end of cycle, and we go all the way back to stage 1.